Big breaking news out of college football, where the college football playoff has approved an expansion from 4 to 12 teams. That has been confirmed by our senior college football writer, Dennis Dodd. The new format reportedly take the 6 highest ranked conference champions and 6 at-large teams. These changes expected to take effect by 2026 and as early as 2024. Let's welcome in the guys behind the Cover 3 podcast. We have Chip Patterson, Tom Fornelli, and Barrett Sallee. This looked like it was dead in the water, and all of a sudden, guys, it is here. Chip, we'll start with you. Just your reaction to the playoff now expanding to 12 teams.
First, I knew we would get here eventually. I think that there was just far too much money on the table when you expand the playoffs. You are literally adding more games. You are literally setting this up so that there can be more profit. You can have more bidders. I mean, the business of college athletics is all about the actual games and the live action on television. So I knew that we would always get here. But an expanded playoff in general, I do think is bad for the fans. I think that the fan who does not have a school that is competing for a national championship, which is most of college football, when all of the conversation is going to be on the playoff even more than it is already because of this expanded field, you're going to feel lost and you're going to feel left behind. I'll say it's good for me because that means that the month of December is now going to include these big games of significance all the way through the month. But when I try to think about the college football fan, especially the one who's not an Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State fan, you're going to find that the discussion around the regular season includes you less and less. And nothing says that more than the fact that they made this daggum announcement in the middle of week 1. Disrespectful to the week 1 games.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point, actually, there, Chip, that you mentioned, is the fact that they're announcing it right now before the Friday night games start and before the first full Saturday slate of the season starts means the entire conversation around college football this weekend will not be on any of the games that are being played to start the year. They're all going to be about the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams. And I'm with you, Chip. I mean, this was an inevitability. We've known it was coming for a while. I'm not exactly excited about it, but this is an era where we've seen the TV contracts are exploding. The Big Ten just signed a giant new deal, which is going to be paying it over $1 billion a year. The regular season only has so many games and so much room for it. The best way to increase the television revenues that the conferences have been getting is to increase the playoffs. So they will talk about how it's to expand the field and make it more interesting for fans of teams that might feel like they don't have a choice. But the reality is, in the long run, it's going to be the same 15 to 20 teams competing for those 12 spots every year. It's going to be the same 5 or 6 teams that actually have a chance to win the national title. And we'll probably be bored of this one again in another 10 years and say we need to go to 16 or 20.
I mean, I feel the same way as both of you guys. And so your points in my mind are valid. I'll go ahead and expand it to this. Tom, you just said the same teams are going to get in. My answer to all of these questions is, why do we favor access over excellence? Access doesn't mean anything in college football. I hate it. I hate divisions in pro sports. I hate allowing automatic qualifiers in college football. Now, granted, there's probably going to be the 6 that aren't necessarily designated for a conference when all is said and done. But just because you win your conference doesn't mean that you're championship caliber. If you're a 2 or 3 loss team, look at last year, right? Does Ole Miss, does Michigan State, does Baylor, do they deserve national championships? Do they have comparable access as Georgia, as Alabama? No, they don't deserve it. And so all this talk about how the regular season's going to be great because people are fighting for conference championships and these 2-loss teams might get in. Okay, I don't necessarily see why that matters. And to Chip's point, it takes away from other issues. We had the backyard brawl yesterday. I don't think either one of those teams has any chance of making the college football playoff now or in an expanded playoff. Yet it was awesome. All we've talked about all day was how incredible that game is. That type of reaction is going to get even more lost in all of this once we expand to 12.
Barrett, was there any particular number? Were you fine with the 4? Should it have been 8? I mean, nobody seems to be liking 12 right now. Was there any expansion that you would be in favor for?
Well, I would rather go back to 2, the BCS. I like 4 the way it is. as long as we could maybe tweak the selection process, go back to a hybrid of the selection committee and the BCS. It's fine. The BCS worked great. There was metrics, advanced metrics now that help even more. I would have much rather had 4 with a different selection process. 8 doesn't go for me because that would be 6 Power 5 conference or 5 Power 5 conference champions, 2 at large or whatever, and a group of 5. So that's not going to fly for me because I don't like automatic bids. In fact, I actually like the 12-team expansion more than what would be an 8-team expansion because you have 6 automatic qualifiers, but they're not designated to a specific conference. So if a 7-5 SEC team wins the SEC championship, then it's not going to get an automatic bid. So, it's complicated. I always say our sport's beautifully dysfunctional, and I think never have we experienced that more than we have the last hour because, to Chip's point earlier, they do all of this stuff on week 1 instead of late February when it would make more sense, not only for this season on the field, but also for the administrators who are making these decisions.
Dennis Dodd talked about how next discussion to be had, revenue distribution between the conferences. Obviously, we've seen the Big Ten and the SEC somewhat set themselves apart. Chip, when we're looking at conference realignment, there has been so much talk around this already. We knew it wasn't done. With this expansion, what does this now do to conference realignment?
Great question, Amanda, because it was something that I've been thinking about a lot here in the last couple minutes. I think it might slow conference realignment, or at least it might slow us barreling towards a world where the only things that exist in college football are the SEC and the Big Ten. And the reason I think that is because we've got those 6 automatic qualifiers. The fact that we are moving forward with a format that has 6 automatic bids to the college football playoff, it's great news for the ACC, it's great news to the Big 12, and it's great news for the Pac-12 because honestly, the way it was looking there for a little bit in June and July, we were wondering if there would be just nothing in the world but 24-team SEC and 24-team Big 10. But now some of those schools and some of those programs, when they're thinking about chasing the money that might be bigger or would be bigger in the SEC or the Big Ten, they have to also think about what they want out of their football program, and staying in the Big 12, the Pac-12, or the ACC would still give them a great shot, a little bit of access to a national championship. So one consequence of this, and probably one of the reasons why you're going to be able to get some of these other commissioners on board with moving forward with a 6 automatic qualifiers, 6 next best up selections, is because now there is a value of being in the ACC and the Big 12 and the Pac-12, and that is an easier access to a conference championship and an easier access to the college football playoff.
I think you're half right, Chip. I think that this will slow it down, the talk of realignment and expansion in the short term. I think long term, we're going to see the same thing we've already seen, because if you look at the landscape of college sports, as we talked about with television deals, the playoff is being expanded because they want to get more money for television. Conferences have been expanding, particularly the Big Ten and the SEC, because they want to get more money for their television deals. But as you look around, there are a lot fewer schools available to them that could really increase their profile and increase their ability to gain revenue on an annual basis. But in the new college football playoff, if revenue distribution ends up being a function of how many teams you get in the playoff, well, suddenly the SEC and the Big Ten are going to look around and say, well, we can add these teams, and if we add these teams, we'll get more teams in the playoff, and then we'll get a bigger share, and that might be our only way to increase revenue on an annual basis. So I think short term, it slows things down. The Big 12, the Pac-12, and the ACC take a breath of relief, but I think long term, we're still heading in the same direction we've been heading the entire time, the Big Ten and the SEC dominating this sport.
Barrett, same question to you. When it comes to conference realignment, speed up or slow down?
I think it's going to slow it down, like Tom said, in the short term, because there's no reason to expand upon this. Tom's right, Chip's right. The Pac-12, the ACC, the Big 12 are jumping for joy right now because if the proposal from last summer goes through, then the access that they feared might not exist now it exists. And that's why if I'm Kevin Warren and I'm Greg Sankey, I go to these commissioners meetings next week and say, at 12 at large or we walk, and just see what happens. Because it's not going to go that way, but at least make it known that, hey, you know what? We're not in the business of letting lesser teams out of the Pac-12 or Big 12 in. So I do think it will slow everything down. That way Texas and Oklahoma get in the SEC. The 4 new teams can get to the Big 12. USC and UCLA can get across and then sort of take a breath, calm things down, and see where we are. I do think, like Chip said, eventually we're going to get there. Tom said this as well. But here's the thing that about this whole situation the last 2-3 months that I think, sort of gets lost in this conversation. It's almost like everyone's scared of it being Big Ten, SEC, everybody else. That's what it is now. Like, how is that bad? If that's what the problem is now, it's going to be like that in the future. So why do we even care? So, I think in the end, we're probably going to have 4 16-team super conferences. I do think we're going to hit the pause button, but then it's going to pick back up once we get settled into this new format.
So, Tom, if you're a Group of 5 school, how are you feeling right now?
Not great. I mean, I think you're just hoping that you still get your breadcrumbs and they still give you one chance, and then they'll throw you up against the best team that's playing in the first round. You'll take your loss, you'll take your paycheck, you'll go home and hope you get invited back next year.
Chip, really quickly, Dennis was talking about a progressive playoff, saying starting around the second week of December, may have games Christmas week. What does this do to bowl games?
It turns them into, sideshow entertainment. And I think that actually, this is a little bit interesting because we have seen the programming around the college football bowl games really just pushing all towards the playoff, which at this current calendar has always been a way off in the distance. I think that all we'll see then is instead of, spending every halftime show of a bowl game pumping up the playoff that's going to be coming, I think what we're going to have is just promotion of the games that are more upcoming. The idea of getting college football playoff games and an expanded playoff within our current bowl structure does appeal to me. I would rather do that than stretch the season into February. So I think that we have always, in the college football playoff era, used the bowls as a way to discuss the playoff. And now we've just got more games to discuss and a little bit more urgency with those discussions.
We've already seen so many players skip out on so many of those bowl games as the years roll along. Not sure how this will look when this expansion does come. Guys, thank you so much. I know you'll be hopping on the podcast soon here to record an emergency pod, most likely here. Cover 3 podcast. Those are the 3 guys behind it, along with Danny Cannell. Everything you need to know about the world of college football, which is changing fast and furious by the day. College football playoff expansion heading to 12 teams as soon as 2024. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.